After that, I hope I'm not too anticlimactic. I'm not sure if, okay. One of the things that struck me when I was working on my own spirituality and continue to work on it is the Bhagavad Gita, which is really a metaphorical story of the conflict we have as human beings within the divine and ourselves. And it tells the story of the Lord, or the divine being Krishna, and his student Arjuna. And they're on the battlefield, and they're getting ready to fight against Arjuna's cousins. And Arjuna tells Krishna, I can't do this. I won't fight the people who live in my house, who are my family, and I will not harm them because they are part of me. And Krishna turns to him and says, they were never part of you. Because they live within you, and you see them as your family, you assume that they are part of you. And the metaphor there is that things go on inside of us that we have incorporated into our lives. And we assume that because of it, it is part of us. And we accept it. And it just runs unchallenged within us. And before we're aware, it's affecting those around us. So what I thought I would do today is just come up with some of the concepts of that sort of thing that runs within us, that challenges us, that deflects the work we do in our spirituality. It sabotages our process, and it happens to us in such simple and continuous ways that we sometimes get trapped in it. And if we look at psychological sets that take place in our minds, there are about 21 fully defined psychological sets in our minds that take place non-stop, circulating within us. And yet, I will just talk about 4 of them, just to give you an example. And I'm sure that each one of you will relate to what I'm saying, because it happens to all of us. And we assume it's our family, it's part of us, and we accept it. So, I'll talk about moral licensing, cognitive bias, cognitive dissonance, and logical fallacies. I've just taken 4 at random out of the 21 psychological sets that run through our mind that are recognized in psychological thinking. So let's go with moral licensing. Now, all of us will be aware, and it will even happen with ourselves. In moral licensing, can I have the first? We work hard, all of us come here, and all of us want to do well in life. We want to be moral. We want to feel good. We want to feel as if we're part of something that's good. Moral licensing talks about the things we do to strengthen our positive self-image. Actually, can I have the next one? Can more likely influence us to make immoral choices. We read about politicians, we read about people who are trying to live a good life, and then all of a sudden we hear stories about them that disappoint us. We even have our own stories within us where this happens. There was a study done at Princeton where they looked at people who were postgraduate students, so these were brilliant thinkers, and they asked them one question, and the question was the role of women should be in the home. And a group strongly disagreed with that. No. Another group, smaller group said, I don't know. And the third group said, definitely they should be in the home. And then they asked them to decide amongst 5 CVs for a job for a senior position. And they padded the woman's resume. And the people who strongly disagreed that a woman's place should not be in the home voted less for the woman than the people who believed otherwise. And when we talk about moral licensing, that takes place in our mind all the time. That we believe, it seems as if when we make a moral decision, somewhere within our mind, it gives us an opportunity to do something the opposite to what we think. Similar study for minority groups, where they felt that minority groups should not hold any senior position. Again, when chosen, the people who strongly disagreed with that prejudicial comment voted less for minority groups to choose the person for the job. So moral licensing takes place in different times, at different times. We see it in the newspaper, we see it in reviews that are being done in politics, and politicians, and actors, and prominent people, and we say, well, why do they do that? Well, the question is, why do we do that? We all do that in different ways. Another issue that we can look at is what is called cognitive bias, where individuals create their own subjective reality which may dictate their behavior in the social world. We see that teenagers are beautiful for that. And we do that ourselves. We have a sense of what we call our subjective reality. And we use that. It forms the platform on which we build our behavior in the social world. And it may be, we may come, I know, I can speak for example, I came from Trinidad to Camden to do my postgraduate psychiatry. And I came to a culture that was different. I turned up to work, I had my lunch break, and I asked, where do I go to the cafeteria? And the head nurse said, oh, you just follow the red lines, take the elevator down, turn to the right, and then turn to the left, and you'll find the cafeteria. And in Trinidad, somebody would have said, let me go with you and show you. And I was too embarrassed to say I didn't know. And I remember I had to go to lectures at different parts of University of Toronto. And I didn't know what was east, what was west. I'd never been there before. And I would remember stopping at the street lights and where the name of the street was, and looking up and trying to figure which way should I go. And it was obvious. And people just walked by. And so I built my cognitive biases that people were not going to be friendly, that I would be too ashamed to ask because I will appear to be stupid, and so on and so on. It happens to all of us. I'm sure each one of us can draw some memory of something that happened to us. Now, there is another one which we call cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is where we have two beliefs that conflict with each other. So, let me give you an example. I know that I lied. I know that lying is not good, it's not moral. But I lied. And it creates cognitive dissonance for us. And the way we deal with it is, one, we may deal with it upfront and say, I'm sorry, I lied. Another way we would deal with it is we would rationalize it and change our behavior, in that we would avoid the person who we lied to. Or we would do something else like rationalize it. Oh, he lies. I've caught him lying, so it's okay. Now all these things are going on in our minds, because all of a sudden we hear about somebody who's showing moral licensing, or the platform on which we live is showing cognitive bias. And then we have cognitive dissonance, which takes place with that as well. So what happens, all this is taking place in our minds, and it is presented, it creates problems. Now, if, for example, a second part of cognitive dissonance, this is where we get mental stress. Cognitive bias is we use our intellect and our belief systems to make it comfortable. Cognitive dissonance is the emotional part of it, where the individual holds two or more contradictory beliefs. Those of us who have kids, how many times have we said, are you going to the party dressed like that? Don't worry, it's okay, go. And the child looks and thinks, should I wear this or not wear it? We create cognitive dissonance. All of us do it. And sometimes we're confronted with new information which conflicts with an existing belief. So I remember going to one of my teachers one day early on when I was trying to get into a spiritual framework, and I kept talking to him about all sorts of spiritual things, and he looked at me and he said, you know, the God of truth is the greatest liar, isn't he? And it frightened me, because I'd never thought about it, because here was I thinking of, you know, divinity and purity and everything. And then he sets me some new information which sort of conflicts with what my belief system is. Those are the things that take place. And you can remember practically everything in our lives. We are playing some role in this. And the last one I'd just like to touch on is logical fallacies. And again, I'm talking about common everyday things that occur around us. Incorrect arguments and logic, which undermines the person's arguments. Example, a spouse or a partner or a friend who has a drinking problem or a drug abuse problem, and they lie. So anytime, if even they say the truth, it's you've lied before, therefore anything you say is a lie. We all do these things, and we're all unaware of it. And those behaviors have become families within us. And we accept them. And we're not even aware of what we're doing. And those are the mind games that conflict with our spirituality. Because we are so busy with this apologizing to others for this type of behavior that it boycotts and it obstructs our approach to our spirituality. So when Krishna was telling Arjuna about this, Arjuna says, my Lord, this is too overwhelming. What should I do? Look at them, thousands of them are my family, and they're there, and I'm ready to fight and kill them. And Krishna says, in the mind and in the heart of the divine, they are already dead. It's your turn to confront that battle. And he says, how do I confront that battle? And Krishna says, you focus on me. You focus on the divine. And this is where, on one hand, we can go to 20 years of psychotherapy to find out about moral licensing or anything, or we can focus on our spirituality. And focusing our spirituality will make a significant difference for us. So, spirituality, when we are under chaos, when our mind is going through all these mind games, and we put ourselves under a functional MRI, all the signals of the brain appear very chaotic. When we're practicing any type of spiritual thinking or practice, breathing techniques, yoga, or anything that has spiritual connotations, the MRI will show that the mind is functioning more coherently. You become more at peace. It begins to extinguish all those negative family and relatives we have within us. We know, second one, please. We know that it also controls impulsive thoughts and behaviors, because we've looked at impulsivity, and when people, after they've done spiritual practices, and you give them choices to make, they make choices that show a longer outcome than just an impulsive quick thing. For example, they will ask them, would you rather invest money? They made choices in proper investment of money after they had done some spiritual practice. Another one. We also know that spiritual practice actually increases our brain neurons. They build more neurons. As we get older, our neurons start dying. With spiritual practice, it builds it. Another one. Now, it activates spiritual experiences. And this is really interesting because we have looked at the brain. And when we have people who are depressed, we give them what are called SSRI, selective serotonin. We deal with serotonin and noradrenaline and things like that. In the brain, there is actually a center that has a neurotransmitter called glutamate, which when we have spiritual experiences, those receptor sites can literally show themselves blasting. And it's a phenomenal experience. Unfortunately, when people use things like LSD and PCP and things like that, it really, it almost makes the glutamate centers toxic. But we know that in spirituality, if we look at people under a functional MRI, you will see the glutamate area begin to light up. And as it lights up, you look at pulse, you look at brain waves, they change to really deep brain waves associated with spirituality. Now, what I want to say is that we can either get caught in the mind games, we can decide we need to confront the mind games, and they're taking place. If you think of 21 possibilities, and they're all interacting, the permutations are hundreds of thousands of possibilities at any time. Or we can say, you know what? I'm going to focus on spirituality. And the more I focus there, the less these thought waves will take place. Two things I want to mention, because we started with the word love. A study was reported in the American Journal of Medicine where they looked at 10,000 men who had 3 indices for heart attacks or heart problems. They had no heart problems, and then they decided that we will monitor them for the next 5 years, and we will see which group presents with angina and which group gets worse. And they asked them one question, and the question was, does your wife show you love? And those who answered yes had 50% less angina episodes than those who said no. They've also shown that for peptic ulcers. And just showing each other love can heal. The other thing that I want to say as I close off today is that spirituality is where our default position is. We get caught in all these games that go on in the mind. We also get caught. There is the life we live outside of ourselves, how we relate to people. But most of all, it's the life we live inside ourselves that connects and creates our journey. And I want to end by saying, no matter what it is that you're struggling with, and no matter what the game the mind is playing, go to your spirituality. That is your home. That is our default position. That is where we belong, because the divine has already destroyed that. We have to conquer it. And in doing that, we become more divine. We are able to help others. We are able to change the world around us. And we are very, very blessed. Thank you.